kemudian keynote speech dari Mr. Stephen Sikars dari Managing Director of the Directorate of Environment and Energy UNIDO, diikuti oleh pembicara pertama yaitu Ibu Nil Guntas dari UNIDO. Beliau adalah Deputy Director Department of Environment. Kemudian akan diikuti oleh pembicara kedua, Dr. Edward Clarence Smith dari UNIDO, dan juga kemudian diikuti oleh pembicara ketiga dari pusat dari Indonesia, yaitu Bapak Hendro Martono dari Kementerian Perindustrian, Kepala Pusat Industri Hijau. Masing-masing kemudian juga kita akan dalam webinar ini juga akan ada pembahas, yaitu Bapak Agustavianus Sofian. Beliau adalah Direktur Perdagangan Komoditas dan Kekayaan Intelektual Kemlu. Dan nanti masing-masing pembicara dan pembahas akan berbicara sekitar 20 menit. Kemudian akan kita lanjutkan dengan sesi diskusi yang akan dipandu oleh moderator. Kemudian mudah-mudahan kita dapat efisien sehingga waktu dapat sesuai dengan jadwal. Kita dapat selesai pukul 12 waktu Wina atau pukul 17 waktu Indonesia bagian Barat. Demikian sekedar pembukaan dari kami, dan kemudian saya mungkin akan langsung mempersilahkan kepada saya belum memperkenalkan diri. Nama saya Adi Zulfuat. Saya adalah Minister Counselor untuk fungsi ekonomi yang membidangi isu UNIDO, dan untuk kegiatan webinar hari ini saya akan bertindak sebagai moderator. Untuk tidak memperpanjang waktu, saya akan mempersilahkan Pak Dubes, Bapak Duta Besar dan Wakil Tetap RI untuk Austria, Slovenia, dan PBB di Wina, Bapak Dr. Darmansyah Jumalah. Bapak Dubes, kami persilahkan untuk menyampaikan opening remarks.
Thank you, Pak Adi. Selamat pagi, selamat siang, dan selamat sore bagi Bapak dan Ibu di Wina, Jakarta, dan dimanapun Bapak Ibu berada. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Sebagai pembuka, izinkan saya mengucapkan salam pembuka dalam bahasa Inggris dulu, terutama untuk rekan-rekan dan kolega saya dari UNIDO. Good morning, Mr. Stephen Sikars, Managing Director of the Directorate of Environment and Energy UNIDO, Ms. Nil Guntas, Deputy Director, Department of Environment UNIDO, Dr. Edward Clarence Smith, Senior Circular Economy Advisor UNIDO, and good afternoon to Mr. Hendro Martono. Selamat siang, Pak. Mr. Hendro Martono is the head of Center for Green Industry, Ministry of Industry, and also good afternoon to Mr. Agustaviano Sofian, Director for Trade, Commodity, and Intellectual Property, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Before addressing the participants in Indonesian language, allow me to express at the outset our thanks and appreciation to you, the distinguished representative of UNIDO, Mr. Stephen Sikars, Ms. Nil Guntas, and Mr. Edward Clarence Smith, for your availability to participate in our webinar today. As a representative of UNIDO, especially in your positions that directly deal with the issue of circular economy, your views will certainly allow participants to gain valuable information on the concepts, the development of circular economy, and opportunity it might offer for developing country like Indonesia. We are thankful to and highly appreciate Director General Lee Yong and UNIDO officials for close cooperations with Indonesia, not only on this particular sector, but also on the other cooperations, including in holding the first regional conference and industrial development, RCID, in Bali on 2018, and a seminar on Industry 4.0 and creative economy in Vienna on 2019. It is our hope that this close and mutual cooperations between us would be sustainable in the upcoming years. Now, I would like to proceed my speech in Bahasa Indonesia, addressed to my Indonesian colleagues. Bapak Ibu peserta webinar yang saya hormati, terima kasih atas kehadiran dalam webinar ini yang diselenggarakan oleh KBRI PT Riwina. Dengan meningkatnya dampak perubahan iklim yang terjadi hampir di seluruh belahan dunia, komunitas internasional semakin menyadari diperlukannya suatu transformasi metode untuk mencapai pertumbuhan ekonomi serta pemanfaatan sumber daya alam yang berkelanjutan. Konsep ekonomi selama ini sangat linier, hanya berfokus pada prinsip yang sangat sederhana, yaitu ambil, pakai, buang. Setelah kita ambil, barang itu kita beli, kemudian kita pakai, sisanya kita buang. Konsep siklus produksi seperti ini sudah tidak relevan, karena hal itu akan memberikan environmental cost yang tinggi. Konsep seperti itu tidak dapat berkontribusi menjawab tantangan perubahan iklim yang saat ini dihadapi umat manusia. Oleh karena itu, model pembangunan ekonomi dan pemanfaatan sumber daya alam yang bersifat revolusioner dan berkelanjutan sangat dibutuhkan di masa sekarang ini. Sekitar tahun 2000-an, terdapat suatu konsep model pembangunan yang bersifat circular atau berkelanjutan. Saat ini dikenal dengan nama circular economy atau ekonomi sirkular, yaitu konsep ekonomi yang berprinsip bahwa produk dan bahan yang biasanya dibuang karena telah melewati masa pakai efektifnya justru didaur ulang, diperbaiki, atau digunakan kembali. Konsep ekonomi seperti ini dinilai dapat menyeimbangkan, make it balance, antara pembangunan ekonomi dan pelestarian lingkungan, khususnya di dalam rangka penanganan perubahan iklim. Oleh sebab itu, saat ini tumbuh optimisme di negara-negara dunia, termasuk Indonesia tentunya, terhadap potensi konsep ekonomi sirkular ini dalam upaya melestarikan lingkungan dan membangun perekonomian yang tangguh pasca COVID-19. Sebagai contoh, berdasarkan laporan Kementerian PPN Bappenas, Indonesia pada tahun 2021, penerapan ekonomi sirkular di beberapa sektor industri berpotensi dapat menambah PDB Indonesia hingga 642 triliun, menciptakan sekitar 4,4 juta lapangan kerja baru hingga tahun 2030 nanti. Dan itu dapat membantu upaya penurunan emisi gas rumah kaca sekitar 126 juta ton karbon dioksida yang ekivalen pada tahun 2030. Meskipun potensinya sangat menjanjikan, implementasi ekonomi sirkular di Indonesia dan negara berkembang lainnya belum maksimal dibanding beberapa penyebabnya, antara lain ya masih rendahnya pemahaman di dalam negara masing-masing, keterbatasan akses finansial dan teknologi, dan juga karena tidak adanya jaminan preferensi pasar, serta adanya potensi bahwa isu ini akan menjadi hambatan non-tarif baru di suatu saat nanti. Saya sangat berharap webinar ini dapat berkontribusi menjawab isu-isu yang saya katakan di atas tadi. Keterlibatan UNIDO dalam webinar ini merupakan added value itu sendiri, karena akan menjelaskan best practices implementasi ekonomi sirkular dalam pembangunan industri. Hal ini diharapkan dapat menginspirasi pemerintah Indonesia dalam upaya memajukan UMKM dan membangun industri 4.0. Bapak Ibu peserta webinar yang saya hormati, sebagai penutup, saya mengucapkan selamat mengikuti dan berdiskusi dalam webinar Circular Economy, Industri Berkelanjutan, Berdimensi Ekonomi dan Lingkungan. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your inspiring opening remarks. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Stephen Sikars to convey his keynote speech. Mr. Sikars, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And Excellency, Dr. Jumala, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Republic of Indonesia to the United Nations in Vienna. First, I would like to thank you and your colleagues at the Permanent Mission of Indonesia for extending this invitation to join this webinar on circular economy and for the opportunity to interact with your colleagues from the capital. And thank you for your warm words during the opening. Let me reply to those that we at UNIDO, and in particular in the Directorate for Environment and Energy, are also looking forward to a close and enduring cooperation. And also good morning and good afternoon to all of you here participating in the webinar. Circular economy does not only provide benefits to the environment, but also to the economy, as the name indicates, and can therefore aid truly sustainable economic development. Its main actors are industries that produce all the goods and services we consume. As a result, circular economy addresses the high ambitions of developing countries for inclusive and sustainable industrialization, innovation, and resilient infrastructure, as laid down in the Sustainable Development Goal number 9, whose main actors are industries as well. Circular economy also contributes, of course, to many other of the SDG goals. Resource efficiency is at the core of circular economy, and it uses the power of economic actors to reduce the use of resources, to increase productivity, to create new circular businesses, and also to create green jobs. By designing waste and pollution out of economic systems, the transition to circular economy can mitigate climate change, slow down biodiversity losses, as well as ocean and land degradation, while enhancing the well-being of our societies and the resilience of our economies. For 40 years, UNIDO has been promoting resource efficiency as a business case that simultaneously reduces production cost and prevents waste and pollution. The business case also leads to innovations and adoption of environmentally sound and cost-effective technologies. Globally, thousands of industrial firms have since embraced resource efficiency to improve their competitiveness, created new green businesses and jobs. Resource efficiency has also been at the center of what UNIDO has been promoting as green industrial development by greening industries and creating new green industries. In November 2020, we have started global consultations as mandated by our member states and engaged over 300 policymakers, industry leaders, and civil society representatives to exchange experiences and deliberate on circular economy in a series of regional meetings. The Indonesian delegates who joined the Asia-Pacific Group meeting stressed that circular economy was one of the key tools for green industrial development in Indonesia. The meeting participants were inspired and energized when they heard that Indonesia's long-term vision to 2045, mid-term development plan, the low-carbon development strategy, all incorporated the circular economy concept. The Indonesian delegation also requested UNIDO to assist by clarifying concepts of circular economy, assessing current challenges, and supporting policy development by engaging with multiple stakeholders. I think today's discussions are going to be part of this endeavor. I'd like to end by thanking Ambassador Jumala again for giving us the start on deepening our collaboration on circular economy with this webinar. I would like to apologize already now for having to leave at around 10:30, since conflicting appointments came up which need, unfortunately, my urgent attention. Nevertheless, I wish all of you thought-provoking discussions in the next 2 hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sikaj, for your illuminating keynote speech. Now, I would like to proceed to the first speaker, Ms. Nilgun Tas. But before I give the floor to Ms. Tas, I would like to read his curriculum vitae, a short one. I would read it in Bahasa Indonesia. Bapak Ibu sekalian, sebelum kita memulai untuk pembicara pertama, yaitu Ibu Nilgun Tas, Terlebih dahulu kami bacakan sedikit mengenai CV beliau. Beliau saat ini adalah menjabat sebagai Deputy Director Departemen Lingkungan UNIDO dan juga merupakan tim antar Departemen Sirkular Ekonomi di UNIDO. Beliau 30 tahun berpengalaman di sektor yang terkait dengan lingkungan dan sebelumnya adalah Wakil Presiden untuk pembangunan UMKM di Turki. Demikian riwayat singkat beliau. Now, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Tas. Please, the floor is yours. You may start your presentation. And the time is 20 minutes. You have the floor, Ms. Tas.
Thank you, Mr. Adi. I am sharing my screen, and I hope everyone can see me and hear me. I will just stop my video for the benefit of everyone. I would like to start our joint presentation with my colleague, Dr. Edward Clarence Smith, who we call Ned shortly, by setting the scene and by talking a little bit about in more detail in circular economy definitions and so on. So please think what you are, look at what you're wearing, what you, because it's Ramadan, I know you did not have breakfast this morning, but we consume millions of products in the nutrition group, in our housing and infrastructure, we use steel, but we also have other manufactured products in our mobility where we move ourselves or the goods, and in what we wear, what we use in our houses. All of these things are products that are the output of industries. They are manufactured. Even if we think of something like communications, mobile phones to computers and similar products, they also require physical goods. And these physical goods are produced by the manufacturing sector. In other services such as health, education, sports, even a restaurant, we sit at a table, or our dry cleaner at the corner of our neighborhood street uses racks and machines. So all in all, what we are consuming is produced by manufacturing industries. In a linear economy, these products can come with what we call planned obsolescence. What is it? Please look at this picture. These two cables do the same thing, but they will not fit into into the product, because this might be the year before and this comes the next year. This is what we call planned obsolescence. It's about changing the product with cosmetic changes so that something you have to throw away the other one, or something you buy breaks down very quickly. Very important concept for circularity. We also have products that are difficult to repair because we cannot disassemble them. And even if we disassemble them, we don't know what the composition of the product is. This also results in difficulty in refurbishing or remanufacturing our product, and very difficult, for instance, for plastics in recycling. The final thing is that we end up with a huge amount of waste that contain valuable materials that are not recoverable or recyclable, or parts and components that we cannot reuse. So this consumption, of course, is based on us taking resources from nature, whether it's materials, whether the land where we dig them from, or where we put our industries on, or the water. Every single industry uses water, and most products also use water when we use them. So what are the materials? This is biomass that we produce in agriculture, fossil fuels, metals, non-metallic minerals. Where are they used? Housing and infrastructure uses 45% of all the resources. Nutrition, 23%, but you would think services not. Look at these. Services, even healthcare uses and communication uses 2% each. So what happens at the end? This is a World Bank study from 2018. We create huge amounts of waste. 44% is food and organics, which use a lot of land and water, but others are also very significant. What happens? We throw them away, and wherever we throw them away, they create huge health impacts because they create pollution. In 2000, based on 2015 figures, every year, 9 million people prematurely die, mostly in low and middle income countries, which is equivalent to 16% of all deaths worldwide. So this is a huge, not only waste of precious humans, but loss of a big economic value. It is estimated that in the same study, which was conducted by the Lancet Commission, per year, 4.6 trillion US dollars are going to waste as well. This means a lot of jobs and a lot of well-being is lost. So, environmental impacts. 50% of climate impacts are coming from us extracting, processing, and making products out of resources. Similarly, 90% of water stress and 90% of biodiversity loss due to land is associated with the same kind of activity, producing and consuming. But we all know, because we produce and we consume, we also create a lot of value added and jobs. So how does UNIDO define circular economy? A circular economy is, in fact, because it is based on industries, we call it an industrial economy, not necessarily an industrialized economy. Please, I draw your attention to this graphic first. We take materials from the nature, we design and manufacture products, we distribute and use them. Every value chain, this is what we call the value chain, every value chain is the same. But in a circular economy, as UNIDO, we say every value chain, every product in every value chain should only have a first and an end of first life, and then it should come back into circulation again and again. So circular economy is an industrial economy that returns products, parts, and materials into use several times, based on the principles that products are designed to last, not made obsolete in a year, for example. That value is maintained for as long as possible by the circular economy practices that we show here, and by minimizing the generation of waste and pollution. Of course, to make all of this more sustainable, we also advise that renewable energy is used along these value chains as much as possible. What enables this? Innovation, digitalization, stewardship, leadership, partnership, and collaboration between businesses, governments, and consumers. So let me talk a little bit about business practices. which are circular economy practices for us before giving the floor to my colleague Ned. So I underlined value chains. A value chain means a product group, a subsector, eventually a sector. Along these domestic and global value chains, we advise, if you can, replace the product, like we are trying to do with single-use plastic bags, shopping bags, for example. The design phase is very important, but it's a part of the terms of reference of the manufacturers. So manufacturers have to focus on the designs to see if they can reduce the amount of materials they use, or eliminate or replace hazardous chemicals, or if they can improve the durability, reusability, upgradability, repairability, and recyclability of their products. In addition, they should try to also enable, Ned will come to that later, to see if their products and parts could be remanufactured, and if possible, increase recycled content in products and ensure products use energy and other resources efficiently throughout their lives. And next is what we very well know, focusing on the manufacturing to maximize resource efficiency. Here, circular economy looks at the whole product lifespan. So it goes beyond just looking at the manufacturing processes, but to look at in manufacturing to the product as something to change. We also should optimize and intensify use of products. I think we have some interference from someone. And regenerate biomass and recycle other materials like plastics and metals and ceramics. After maximizing circularity everywhere else, we can also recover energy from remaining waste. So what we end up with, we strengthen both the resilience of our firms, but also economies. With that, I invite, one last slide. Who are the actors? The actors are us, the consumers, the businesses, and the governments. I'm not going to elaborate on the benefits. There are many, and I will let you look at these. But what is the role of governments? It's to enable us to buy more circular products. Of course, they have to also raise awareness of consumers to understand the benefits first, and then to move the businesses increasingly to design and produce more circular and safer products where there is also an increase in profitability. With that, I thank you for now and request Ned to come back.
Thank you, Ilgun. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon to our colleagues in Indonesia. Good morning to everybody else in this part of the world. Nilgun, have you left the screen on? I don't see I don't see the, do you want me to share it from my end? Is that the idea?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. In which case, I'm going to have to do some digging here.
It's at the bottom of your. Would you like me to share the screen?
Please, please. I think that's the idea, right?
I will. Yes, you just tell me when to move.
There we go. Yes. Yes, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. I want to take you now through this diagram and comment on it, primarily from the point of view, your point of view, of being government officials and what can be the role of government here. Go ahead, Nilgam, press the button. What I want to talk about first is use, the user. That's you, that's me, but also not just, shall we say, individual consumers in households, but also government. Governments are users, companies are users, schools are users. There are many different types of users, but I think these four strategies are common to any kind of user in an economy about how to promote a circular economy. Before I go through those, let me just make one comment, which I think is important to keep in mind when we're talking about circular economies. Many people think that circular economies, perhaps because of the actual term circular economy, think that what we're talking about is a recycling economy. That's not completely correct. Yes, of course, recycling is an integral part of a circular economy, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, what we are trying to do in circular economies is to minimize the amount of materials that economies need to produce value. And there are various ways that we can minimize that material flows in our economy. The first, and actually the simplest, and perhaps the most radical, is that we don't purchase. We don't purchase, sorry, can you just go back? We don't purchase everything that we need. We don't need to purchase it now. Or maybe we don't purchase it new. We can buy it secondhand. Or, interestingly, I think even more, is that we don't purchase the service of a product. We don't purchase the product itself, but we purchase the service of that product. We purchase what we want to get from that product and not from the product themselves. A very obvious example, we don't buy a car, but we buy the service of mobility through taxis, through buses, through car sharing, and so on. The second strategy is simply to use less materials, use less energy. And that we can do as users, first of all, through our choices as consumers of what type of products we want to buy. A small car versus a big car, a motorbike versus a small car, a bike versus a motorbike, maybe even a scooter versus a bike. And of course, through good usage practices. Now, UNIDO, through its resource efficiency and cleaner production program, has been promoting good usage habits at the industrial level. But those principles are valid also for the user. We as users can have better usage habits, which reduces the amount of materials and energy that our products are using. A third strategy is to keep products in use longer in the economy, which again, if you think about it, if we can keep products going for longer, then there will be less materials flowing through our economies. And we can do that by maintaining and repairing our products and ensuring that our products are reused. When we no longer have use for a product, we can at least pass it on to someone else who can continue to use that product. And then only finally do we get to the recycling part, which actually has two parts to it. When we talk recycling, we often think, oh, what we're doing is we're just extracting from old products the materials that they were originally made from, and we're going to reuse those, the metals, the plastics, the whatever it happens to be. But actually, there is an intermediate step, which is to recycle and reuse the parts that made up that product. So you take the product apart and you reuse the parts to make new products. And that is remanufacturing and refurbishing. And I would say that the role of governments here is to push users to adopt these strategies, doing it through education and the use of both positive and negative incentives. Next slide. Now, I want to come back to this third strategy, keeping products in use longer. And I want to talk to you about the concept of value of a product. Now, I'm not talking here financial value, commercial value. I'm talking use value, the value that a product has because it has a use to us. And this little diagram is showing you, if you want, the lifetime of a product from the moment that it is manufactured to the moment that it is going back to recycling. And so if you think about it, during production, essentially, the user is adding a lot, the producer is adding a lot of value, use value to materials. You have amorphous materials which are put together and become something useful to you. Now, ideally, of course, we'd love all of our products, at least in a circular economy, to go on forever and ever and ever, to have the same use value forever. But as we know, that's not life. Products, they lose their value with time, they get old, but we can use maintenance, for instance, to re-give value, use value to a product. You know, we can put in the oil in our car to make sure that the engine is running properly and so maintain the length, the lifetime of that engine. Unfortunately, there can be times when your product breaks. And of course, when it breaks, it can no longer do anything for you. And therefore, it has lost all use value. But again, through repair, you can bring it back up to begin to give you use again. And so you can go through a second use, and then you can pass it on to another person who will have it through a third use, and it'll go on to a fourth use, perhaps. All the time, of course, this product is getting old. And finally, we get to the point where it can no longer do its job, and you go back to recycling, come back to the primary materials that it was made of, which will go back into production. So you have to think about this, certainly this strategy of keeping products in use longer as a way of maintaining use value of a product for as long as possible. And remember that all of this creates new business opportunities, creating higher skilled jobs in the process. Next slide. I want to quickly talk about repair. It's a very hot issue right now. And in fact, this morning when I was reading my newspaper, there was an article right there about repair and the right to repair. Many countries in the EU, many states in the US are pushing for legislation on the right to repair. And what that really means is the idea behind this legislation is to push manufacturers to make repair easier and, very importantly, less expensive, because consumers are very price sensitive when it comes to repair. Just to give you an example, this is in Europe, but there was a Eurobarometer survey, and in that survey, 3/4 of the people said that they would like to have their items repaired, but they tend to replace them because they find it too expensive to repair. But what is too expensive for them? Well, people tend to repair their products if the cost of that repair doesn't exceed a third or a half of the price of a new product. And so you can imagine that if we want to encourage consumers, people to repair their products, we have to make sure that repair is as cheap as possible. And that's what a lot of this legislation is about. Nilgum mentioned the idea of, sorry, if you could go back, planned obsolescence. This is also a big issue. It makes sense, if you want, for manufacturers who make their money by selling products to have those products not last too long. And so they tend to design their products to break relatively quickly. Now, to prevent this, some countries are requiring that warranty periods on the products be longer, go from 3 to 5 years. And how does that work? Well, remember that if something breaks during a warranty period, it's the manufacturer or the retailer that has to pay for the repair. So now there is an incentive for the manufacturer, if you increase the required warranty periods, to make that product last longer. The more frequent use of software in products, that we see more and more software in products, is also an issue that is being much discussed, because the problem is that manufacturers, if they want, they can turn off a product through the software, and therefore they can push users to buy a new one. This is a big issue, for instance, with iPhones. Next slide. I want to talk about reuse too a little bit, especially the fact that a lot of used goods are traded in international, are traded internationally, as we well know. I mean, there is actually considerable international trade in used products. Many of the more complex products that we make are traded internationally. Cars, a lot of cars are traded internationally, used cars. And there's also a strong trade in car parts, used car parts. Secondhand clothes are traded very much internationally. And much of this trade, I have to say, is from the developed to the developing countries. Now, interestingly enough, many developing countries have put in barriers to importing secondhand goods. They actually want to slow down the import of secondhand goods. They put in licensing requirements or special tariff rates or special taxes or simply bans on imports. And the most commonly effective products for these kinds of barriers are cars and car parts, machinery, clothing, and medical devices. Next slide, please. Now, there are various reasons for these barriers, perfectly good reasons. There are concerns over the health and safety risks of the products. If they're old, they may have higher risks associated with them. There's a concern that so-called used products are actually waste products, and this has been a big issue, for instance, in all of the discussions in the Basel Convention. And there is the desire to protect local manufacturers and salespeople, and that's especially been the case with secondhand clothes. Now, the thing is, in terms of circular economy, we've got to recognize that our economies are all linked. And therefore, a lot of these circularities that we're talking about will be from one economy to another. So should we be encouraging or discouraging international trade in used goods? My sense, but then I'm very much into the circular economy and I want to promote it, is that we should encourage the trade, international trade in used goods. But I think we need to have a discussion about this and find a reasonable compromise in this sphere. But we do need to have a discussion on this. Next slide, please. So now I want to go just into remanufacturing. So let's talk about that a little bit. Just for those of you who are not completely familiar with remanufacturing and the similar term refurbishing, basically these are ways that we can recycle and reuse the parts that make up a product rather than the material. That's the difference between remanufacturing and recycling. Now, of these two operations, remanufacturing is the higher quality operation. So let me just go through that one. What you're doing in remanufacturing is you're taking a used product and you completely disassemble it. The parts are then cleaned. Any used or broken parts are replaced, and they're replaced with a combination of reused or repaired or new parts. If there's software, that's updated, and everything is reassembled. The reassembled product is tested to ensure that it meets or exceeds original equipment manufacturer's performance specifications. And the remanufactured product carries a warranty that is equivalent to that of a new product. So essentially, in remanufacturing, you are remaking products which are as good as the new products. That is what the warranty is about. Now, since a remanufactured product is equivalent essentially to a new product, the original manufacturers are often in charge of remanufacturing, and in fact, it is an integral part of their business model. Now, refurbishing is a less high quality version of remanufacturing, and consequently, normally the warranty that is offered is not so good on a refurbished product. And very often, original manufacturers may not be involved in refurbishing. So those are the key differences. But essentially what we have here is a mechanism to recycle parts of a product rather than go all the way back to recycling of the materials. Next slide, please. Just going on. Now, remanufacturing and refurbishing are currently going on globally. Although I have to say that developed countries still tend to dominate this market. But it's interesting, for instance, Lingkungan just pointed out to me this morning that as part of the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, there is a clause in there which essentially says that remanufactured products are to be considered equivalent to new products. And this is telling us that essentially we can start having remanufacturing going on and encouraged through free trade agreements of that nature. Now, it's important to remember that in remanufacturing and refurbishing, it's not necessarily the whole product which is remanufactured or refurbished. It could be just one part of it. Could be, for instance, in cars which are remanufactured, it's actually the engines in the cars that are remanufactured. And the rest of the product might be stripped for spare parts or simply recycled. Now, at the moment, products which are being remanufactured and refurbished tend to be those which have a high value, are durable, the technology doesn't change terribly quickly, and fashions for those products don't change quickly. So airplanes, for instance, or robots, industrial robots, or medical equipment, that kind of thing. And I think the role of governments here, in terms certainly of promoting a circular economy, is to take action to extend remanufacturing to more classes of products. And I would point out that I personally believe that remanufacturing and refurbishing could become a new growth area for developing countries. And indeed, I was just mentioning the fact that the remanufacturing is in the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, and China, for instance, I have read, has a strategy to become a big player in the remanufacturing field. So this is a whole new area of industry that is opening up, I think, for developing countries. I want to talk now finally about recycling. So let's go on to that. Next slide. So I think it's very important with recycling to remember these very basic principles. Any recycling process will generate the desired material, which is normally called the recyclate, but also it will generate new residues which need to be managed appropriately. Recycling is a green industry, yes, but it also does generate waste streams. And some of those waste streams can be quite toxic, depending on the product that we're talking about. And so recycling has to be controlled like any other kind of industrial activity. The second point that you have to remember about recycling is that a material can really be recycled, not recyclable, which is just saying, well, it could be recycled, but actually really recycled back into something else when there are three things available. There's a cost-effective recycling technology for it, there's a market for that recyclate, and the price of the recyclate is lower than equivalent virgin material. And the role of government, I would say, in recycling is to make sure that these three conditions exist. That will make recycling really happen. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about some recycling rates. So in terms of metals, well, in principle, of course, all metals are infinitely recyclable. You can, in theory, you can recycle them forever and ever and ever. Some are, in fact, very well recycled at the moment. For instance, iron and steel, about 2/3 of the steel that is produced at the moment from recycled iron and steel. That's not too bad. The figure for aluminium is about 70%. Now, other metals, for instance, the rare earth metals, are poorly recycled, very poorly recycled. And that's one reason why governments, for instance, are so keen to promote the recycling of electronic equipment, because that is equipment that includes rare earths. They only work with rare earths. But at the moment, those rare earths are very poorly recycled from old electronic equipment. Other materials have, I would say, okay to good recycling rate. About half of post-consumer paper waste is recycled at the moment, and about 20% of glass is, which is produced is recycled. And depending on the type of glass, so for container glass or for bottles and so on, it's 30%. For flat glass, it's more like 10%. Then other materials are actually, at the moment, much more problematic. I mean, the one that we certainly have seen a lot of press about is plastics, and no more than 2% of waste plastics are currently being recycled. And there the problem is technology more than anything else. And it's even worse actually for textiles, in the sense that only 1% of textile waste is properly recycled back to something of equal value or equivalent value of the original product. 19%, about a fifth, is so-called downcycled. It goes to some other use, but a low value use. And the rest is incinerated or landfilled, which is, if you think about it, a huge loss of that value that I was talking about at the beginning. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk about regeneration. Now, you may have noticed, and in fact, Nilgun said it when she showed that pie chart of waste, that a very large proportion at the global level of waste is biological waste. It's biomass of some sort. And this is what regeneration is about. It's about how to deal with our biological wastes. Because you've got to remember, on the one hand, agriculture and forestry, they impoverish soils. They extract nutrients and they extract the soil carbon. And of course, if we go on doing that, then eventually the soils give up. They can't grow anything anymore. Now, on the other hand, much of the biomass waste that we generate, the food waste, the other types of organic waste, the wastewater treatment sludge, they are very poorly managed and create us environmental and health problems of many types. Now, in modern times, we've tried to maintain soil fertility by the massive use of artificial fertilizers. And this, frankly, is unsustainable. We've got to a point where the amounts of nitrogen entering into the environment are way beyond sustainable levels as far as the ecosystems are concerned, and we're getting to that point with phosphorus. So we need to maintain our soil fertility. We have to maintain our soil fertility. If we don't maintain our soil fertility, we can't grow our food. And we have to regenerate those soils, but we have to do it naturally. And the way to do that is by recycling our biomass waste back to the land. And we can do that by harnessing the Earth's natural recycling systems, the bacteria primarily, in operations which are run industrially. And the two which are most talked about is composting and anaerobic digestion. I mean, my grandmother had a composting heap at the bottom of her garden, but that's not industrial. You can do this on an industrial scale. Next slide, please. And these are essentially, if you want, industrial scale composting and anaerobic digestion. So we're talking about operations that can be optimized, that can be managed to maximize yields and maximize or minimize the time that it takes to make these products. The basic difference here is that composting is aerobic. The bacteria that do the work need to have oxygen to do their work. And this is a typical kind of industrial operation of composting. This is done outside, but you can also do it. There are various ways of doing this. And then you have anaerobic digestion, which I'm sure many of you know about. It's where the bacteria work anaerobically. They don't want oxygen. And this is the way that we have been producing biogas. So you get a lot of waste of one form or another into your fermenter. And from that fermenter, you have biogas, which can be used in various ways, as well as what is called digestate. Now, I want to just point out that we tend to think of anaerobic digestion as a way of producing biogas. So biogas is considered to be the main product. But from a circular economy point of view, actually, biogas is a byproduct. It's a useful byproduct, but what we're really trying to do through anaerobic digestion is to make this digestate, which then can, in this tiny little picture here, we can see, be put back onto the land to regenerate our soils. Next slide, please. How are we doing for time? Yes. Let me, a quick word about design. So Nilgun has already mentioned product design and the fact that product design is key to making a circular economy happen. But product designers first need companies to decide what their circular business model will be. what do I want to do with my product? Do I want to be selling the service of my products rather than products themselves? Is that my business model? And it is for many companies. Do I want to integrate remanufacturing into the business? Do I want to make the product recyclable or regenerable? Do I want to make it something that bioplastic, for instance, or plastic? How durable do I want to make my product? How easily maintained? How easily repaired? Etc. etc. All of these are decisions that the manufacturer must first make in terms of the circular business model that he or she wants to follow, and then the product designer can make the product in that way. And the role of government, I would say in this point, sorry, if you could just go back, the role of government is to push companies to adopt circular business models, either directly through green procurement, for instance, or they can do it indirectly through increased taxes on waste or virgin materials. And one point I want to make here is that I feel that there is a lack of product design capabilities in developing countries. It seems to me that most of the product designers in the world are working in the developed countries. And we need to change that if our circular economy transitions are going to work. Developing country governments also need to build their country's capability in product design. And now I just want a quick word about distribution. Now, there are also circular economy strategies that can be used in the distribution chain. So we're talking about the shops, the warehouses, the retails, etc. Of course, they can work, first of all, on preventing loss of products through spoilage, and this is especially true for food products. They can minimize the use of tertiary packaging. They can minimize transportation distances. But now, and that is something that they could do anyway if you want. But now, from a circular economy point of view, there are other roles that can be part of the distribution chain. They can offer maintenance and repair services to users. They can also redistribute products, used products for reuse. If you think about it, all of those secondhand shops are in the distribution chain. And they can also become, and I think this is very important, key players in reverse logistics, because I think that this circular economy is only going to work if we have a system where not only are products moving from the traditional way, from the producer to the consumer, but also that the used products that need to be remanufactured, reused, recycled are going back the other way. And so I think they are going to play a key role in the reverse logistics that we need for circular economies. And often this is being driven, by the way, it's already happening, and it's driven by so-called extended producer regulations.
Ned, I need a minute to finish up.
Yes, let me just go to the next one. And these are policy options. I would just say that these are here for you to look at. They give you examples of the kinds of policies that you could be using to transition to a circular economy. Neil, over to you.
Thank you, Ned. So how do we move forward? Mr. Ade, I need to take a minute to finish up, if you will allow me.
Yes, sure, please.
Yes, so how do we move forward at the country level? I think the most important thing is to create a shared vision for circular economy as a means to achieving important societal goals. And then we also recommend to create an independent unit in government who would deal with different interest groups, whether it's the government, business, civil society, and consumers. The next thing is to create a cross-sectoral and pre-competitive for businesses, a space for exchanging information, setting up of partnerships, and definition of standards. On 21st and 22nd April, for example, 8 ministries came together to discuss on how to move on transitioning existing industrial parks into eco-industrial parks in Indonesia And this was facilitated by our ongoing project on eco-industrial park development in Indonesia. The next thing is to ensure that there is collaboration with the business community and consumer groups so that areas could be selected within focus sectors. When we say that, of course, we mean value chains for products, groups of products, or within subsectors, which are economically and socially and environmentally relevant, and based on existing data and information to develop a system of targets and indicators. Most countries start doing research and try collecting data, but in developing countries, collection of data is extremely difficult. So instead of delaying 1, 2, or 3 years to collect that data, we advise you try to move on by conversation, by creating a shared vision in some sectors to identify systematically specific solutions and barriers and incentives to circular economy practices. The next thing we advise is to build on existing strengths as much as possible. For example, focus on industrial parks to create circular economy clusters, circularity, particularly in eco-industrial parks, which I mentioned. And very importantly, launch also, Ned mentioned education of consumers, but an educational initiative also for the future generation of consumers, meaning school curricula, so that the next generation learns the benefits of circular economy. Now, I just want to finish in 10 seconds, focusing on Indonesia and the manufacturing sector. This is the results from our recently finished resource efficiency project. 149 enterprises in 11 provinces were assisted together with our counterparts in Indonesia to implement resource efficiency at the firm level, which is a part of the broader circular economy framework where we define resource efficiency at increasingly higher levels, value chains, and so on. And you can see this. They have reduced wastewater, electricity, water, and generally greenhouse gas emissions annually. With an investment of 10.3 million, they have achieved a financial savings of 19.6 million that enables these companies to improve their competitiveness and upgrade their technologies. So Indonesia knows and has experience in the primary building blocks of circularity. With that, and circular economy, I thank you for your attention and apologize for being a bit over time. Thank you. We look forward to your questions and at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nilguntas, and also Dr. Edward Clarence Smith for your comprehensive presentation on circular economy principles, benefits, and policies, in which you mentioned, among others, the benefit not only from the perspective of economic aspect or environmental aspect, but also its potential to improve human health. You also stress, among others, that the issue of circular economies goes beyond recycling, but it also includes consumer behaviors in using products. And I think one of the most important that I can see from your presentation is the role of government in terms of policy and regulations. So I would like to proceed with the next speaker from Indonesia, And maybe, excuse me, I will switch to bahasa Indonesia after this. Baik Bapak-Bapak, Ibu-Ibu, para hadirin webinar sekalian, saatnya kita akan mempersilahkan pembicara ketiga, yaitu Bapak R. Hendro Martono, Kepala Pusat Industri Hijau dari Kementerian Perindustrian Republik Indonesia. Dan sebelum kami mempersilahkan Pak Hendro Martono untuk menyampaikan presentasinya, terlebih dahulu kami akan sampaikan sedikit mengenai riwayat hidup beliau. Beliau saat ini adalah Kepala Pusat Industri Hijau di Kementerian Perindustrian. Sebelumnya juga pernah menjabat sebagai Kepala Pusat Peningkatan Penggunaan Produk Dalam Negeri. Riwayat pendidikan beliau antara lain adalah beliau adalah lulusan dari University of Colorado at Denver dan juga Universitas Trisakti. Beliau juga berpengalaman berpartisipasi dalam berbagai forum internasional sebagai delegasi Republik Indonesia, antara lain di berbagai event di Tokyo, Shanghai, juga di Jenewa yang terkait dengan dan juga di Kamboja, Korea, dan India. Demikian riwayat singkat beliau. Tanpa memperpanjang waktu, kami persilahkan kepada Bapak Hendro Martono untuk menyampaikan presentasinya. Silakan Pak Hendro.
Terima kasih Pak Adi atas kesempatannya. Sebelumnya saya mau menyampaikan yang terhormat Bapak Dubes RI untuk WINA, Bapak Dr. Dormansyah Jumala, yang saya hormati juga Bapak Ibu narasumber ya dari tim UNIDO, Bapak Ibu di KBRI WINA, serta para peserta webinar yang saya hormati yang mengikuti acara pada hari ini. Sebelumnya saya mohon izin untuk share paparan, kalau diizinkan Pak Adi.
Silakan sudah. Ya, sudah muncul Pak.
Baik. Terkait dengan apa yang disampaikan tadi, menarik sekali ya, terkait dengan circular economy yang disampaikan oleh Mr. Edward, Clarence, Miguel Tas. Thank you for your information. Saya ingin menyampaikan bahwa ada kebijakan terkait dengan industri hijau di sektor industri, di mana dalam Undang-Undang Nomor 3 Tahun 2014, suara saya kedengaran nggak? Mohon maaf, Pak Adi. Baik. Dalam Undang-Undang Nomor 3 Tahun 2014 tentang perindustrian, pada pasal 3 huruf C disebutkan bahwa perindustrian diselenggarakan dengan tujuan mewujudkan industri yang mandiri, berdaya saing, maju, serta industri hijau, atau green industry. Hal tersebut kemudian diperkuat melalui Peraturan Pemerintah Nomor 41 Tahun 2015 tentang pembangunan sumber daya industri, yang disebutkan bahwa perusahaan industri dan perusahaan kawasan industri wajib untuk memanfaatkan sumber daya alam secara efisien, ramah lingkungan, dan berkelanjutan. Pemanfaatan sumber daya alam secara ramah lingkungan dan berkelanjutan dilakukan melalui pengurangan limbah, penggunaan kembali, reuse, pengolahan kembali, dan pemulihan. Ini sejalan dengan circular economy. Kebijakan lain yang terkait dengan pengembangan industri hijau adalah Peraturan Pemerintah Nomor 29 Tahun 2018 tentang pemberdayaan industri, yang menjelaskan mengenai standar industri hijau yang memuat ketentuan mengenai bahan baku, bahan penolong, energi, proses produksi, produk, manajemen pengusahaan, pengelolaan limbah. Selain itu PP 28/2021 tentang penyelenggaraan bidang perindustrian menegaskan bahwa adanya pengendalian dan pengawasan terkait efisiensi sumber daya, manajemen energi, manajemen air, dan penerapan standar industri hijau. Ini nggak bisa maju ya? Oke. Slide berikutnya ini menyampaikan tentang strategi pengembangan dari industri hijau. Ada 2 strategi, yakni yang pertama adalah greening of existing industry atau mengembangkan industri yang sudah ada, existing, menuju industri hijau. Upayanya adalah dengan meningkatkan kinerja lingkungan dari industri yang sudah ada, sebagai contoh melakukan efisiensi sumber daya, pengurangan limbah emisi, manajemen keamanan bahan kimia, penghentian penggunaan bahan kimia yang dilarang, penggantian sumber energi terbarukan, dan redesign proses produk. Tadi juga sudah disampaikan oleh narasumber dari UNIDO. Yang kedua adalah creation of new green industry, yaitu membangun industri baru dengan prinsip industri hijau. Untuk creating new green industry dilakukan dengan mendukung penciptaan industri yang ramah lingkungan dengan melakukan penerapan 4R, reduce, reuse, recycle, and recovery. Sementara itu belum reman, seperti yang disampaikan UNIDO, atau repair ya. Yang berikutnya adalah penerapan teknologi dan peralatan pengendalian pencemaran, penerapan teknologi hemat energi, penerapan pengolahan limbah dan emisi, serta penerapan layanan analisis dan konsultasi lingkungan. Berikutnya adalah saya akan menyampaikan program pengembangan industri hijau yang sudah kita laksanakan. Dalam membangun industri baru dengan prinsip industri hijau dilakukan beberapa program, diantaranya adalah pemberian penghargaan industri hijau, dengan tujuan memberikan motivasi kepada perusahaan industri untuk menerapkan prinsip industri hijau pada proses produksinya. Dari data penghargaan industri hijau tahun 2019, didapatkan penghematan sebesar 3,5 triliun rupiah dari penggunaan energi dan 228 miliar rupiah dari penggunaan air yang dilakukan oleh 138 perusahaan penerima penghargaan industri hijau. Kementerian Perindustrian sejak tahun 2017 telah melakukan pengembangan program sertifikasi industri hijau, yaitu pengakuan yang diberikan oleh lembaga sertifikasi industri hijau untuk menyatakan bahwa perusahaan industri telah memenuhi standar industri hijau. Melalui standar industri hijau, perusahaan diarahkan untuk lebih efisien, efektif dalam menggunakan sumber daya alam, bahan baku, energi, air, dan ketaatan dalam mengikuti aturan lingkungan hidup, serta terus melakukan continuous improvement. Saat ini, Kementerian Perindustrian juga sedang mengembangkan program circular economy pada beberapa komoditi industri, diantaranya elektronik, kemasan, kertas, tekstil, logam, peralatan rumah tangga, otomotif, dan alat angkut lainnya, ban atau karet, dan furniture. Penerapan industri hijau mempunyai manfaat perusahaan industri yang tersertifikasi industri hijau pada slide berikutnya dapat disampaikan ada 28 standar industri hijau yang dikelompokkan beda. Oke. Jadi Kementerian Perindustrian juga sejak tahun 2017 telah mengembangkan program sertifikasi industri hijau, tadi sudah disampaikan. Ya, kami sudah menetapkan 28 standar industri hijau berdasarkan peraturan Menteri Perindustrian sebanyak 28 standar sebagaimana yang ditunjukkan pada slide terkait dengan industri semen, susu bubuk, pupuk Korea, karet remah, industri batik, industri dan lain sebagainya. Untuk menghemat waktu saya skip aja. Ini adalah 37 perusahaan yang sudah memiliki sertifikasi industri hijau, 4 dari industri pupuk, 4 dari industri susu bubuk, 7 perusahaan dari industri karet remah, 3 perusahaan dari pengasapan karet, 9 perusahaan dari industri semen, 5 perusahaan dari industri ubin keramik, 2 perusahaan dari industri pulp and kertas, 2 perusahaan dari industri cat, serta 1 dari industri tekstil. Proses sertifikasi dan pembiayaan untuk sertifikasi industri hijau dibiayai oleh anggaran APBN ya. Masih dibiayai oleh APBN melalui Kementerian Perindustrian. Berikutnya, nah, manfaat dari penerapan industri hijau itu yang mendapatkan manfaat adalah dari 3 entitas, yaitu industri itu sendiri, masyarakat, dan lingkungan. Beberapa manfaat penerapan industri hijau antara lain, pertama, mendukung capaian sustainability goals sesuai target dalam program keberlanjutan yang dilaporkan oleh perusahaan. Kedua, tentunya lingkungan kerja lebih sehat, SDM lebih produktif, biaya kesehatan pastinya menurun. Nah, yang penting adalah 3 ini. Brand awareness yang baik pada konsumen dan investor. Pastinya yang keempat adalah efisiensi dari energi, air, bahan baku yang ujungnya nanti akan ada cost saving yang bisa menimbulkan investasi baru atau pengembangan bisnis. Selain itu dari masyarakat dan lingkungan, yaitu tadi berkurangnya polusi, emisi limbah, dari industri, perbaikan kualitas lingkungan. Yang kedua, mendukung pencapaian target pemerintah terkait penurunan gas rumah kaca, konservasi air, efisiensi energi, dan ketahanan energi nasional. Yang ketiga, tentunya mendukung target kebijakan pengelolaan lingkungan, pengurangan merkuri, dan bahan berbahaya lainnya, sampah plastik, sampah laut, dan program Citarum Harum. Upaya lain yang telah dilakukan Kementerian Perindustrian dalam mengembangkan industri hijau adalah kegiatan pemberian penghargaan. Sejak tahun 2010 sampai sekarang sudah diberikan sebanyak 895 perusahaan yang mendapatkan penghargaan industri hijau. Nah, ini peran industri daur ulang dalam mendukung ekonomi sirkular ya. Industri daur ulang berperan dalam mendukung ekonomi sirkular melalui penggunaan bahan baku daur ulang dengan jumlah atau kapasitas yang berbeda untuk masing-masing subsektor industri. Saat ini sudah terdapat beberapa industri daur ulang seperti industri daur ulang plastik termasuk industri serat recycle untuk industri tekstil sebanyak 241 perusahaan dengan kapasitas 2,5 juta ton per tahun yang menyerap tenaga kerja sebanyak 28.563 orang. Menggunakan bahan baku daur ulang scrap impor 20% dari total kebutuhan bahan baku. Berikutnya adalah industri daur ulang kertas sebanyak 50 perusahaan dengan total kapasitas produksi sebanyak 12 juta ton per tahun, menyerap tenaga kerja sebanyak kurang lebih 37.000 orang. Total kebutuhan bahan bakunya mencapai 7,8 juta ton, dipenuhi dari dalam negeri sebesar 3,6 juta ton. Sisanya 3 juta ton impor. Yang ketiga adalah industri daur ulang tekstil sebanyak 9 perusahaan dengan kapasitas 113.000 ton per tahun, menggunakan bahan baku daur ulang sebanyak 76,7 ribu ton, yang sekitar 36%-nya berasal dari impor. Saat ini utilisasinya 70%, tenaga kerja yang diserap sebanyak 3.500 orang. Yang berikutnya adalah industri daur ulang besi baja sebanyak 60 perusahaan menggunakan bahan baku scrap sebagian besar impor. 70-90% itu impor. Kapasitasnya 9 juta ton per tahun. Nah, dalam mendukung industri daur ulang terdapat beberapa tantangan pengelolaan bahan baku daur ulang yang dihadapi, antara lain kesadaran konsumen yang bijak ya untuk menggunakan barang konsumsi dan bijak dalam membuang sampah atau limbah dari produk bekas pakai. Yang kedua adalah antara pemilahan, pengumpulan, dan pengangkutan sampah daur ulang itu harus terpadu agar sampah atau limbah layak untuk didaur ulang dan aman bagi lingkungan. Jadi sistem terpadu ini yang jadi kendala ya. Ketiga adalah perizinan pemanfaatan limbah B3. Proses perizinan seharusnya dipermudah dan dipercepat sehingga dapat mengurangi penumpukan atau penimbunan limbah B3 yang terlalu lama. Nah, yang keempat adalah sektor informal perlu ditata dengan sistem pengumpulan yang lebih baik dan diberikan edukasi agar pemilahan dan pengumpulan sampah dilakukan secara aman bagi pelaku dan lingkungan. Yang kelima adalah ketersediaan sampah atau limbah sebagai bahan baku yang layak daur ulang saat ini belum dipenuhi sesuai dengan kebutuhan industri daur ulang, sehingga masih dilakukan impor untuk bahan baku daur ulang. Yang keenam, ya ini sama klasik, kelengkapan dan akurasi data sampah, jumlah dan lokasi saat ini belum tersedia secara menyeluruh, serta masih bersifat parsial maupun sektoral. Circular economy dalam rangka pengembangan industri hijau, paradigma lama yang menganggap limbah adalah cost saat ini sudah tidak berlaku lagi karena limbah sudah dianggap sebagai resource yang bernilai. Konsep ekonomi sirkular akan mendorong pertumbuhan industri-industri baru yang ramah lingkungan serta mampu meningkatkan daya saingnya. Khusus untuk ekonomi hijau, mendukung ekonomi hijau, green economy, dan pembangunan rendah karbon melalui pendekatan 5R, penerapan circular economy dilakukan dengan berbagai cara, antara lain mendorong efisiensi penggunaan bahan baku, mendorong produksi barang yang dapat digunakan, mendorong produksi barang yang dapat terurai. Banyak ini yang kita lakukan, bisa mungkin dibaca di paparan atau nanti kita share paparan ini untuk mempersingkat waktu. Next, slide berikutnya adalah ini yang sudah upaya Kementerian Perindustrian lakukan dalam mendukung ekonomi sirkuler. Di antaranya yang pertama adalah penerapan industri hijau, 4R, reduce, reuse, recycle, and recovery. Yang kedua, mendorong pertumbuhan industri daur ulang dan produksi produk dapat didaur ulang. Kami melakukan juga bimbingan teknis, pemilihan sampah plastik sebagai bahan baku industri daur ulang. 5, menyusun kajian standar dan kriteria dari refuse derived fuel di industri semen, penyusunan pedoman pengelolaan sampah kemasan sektor industri, penyusunan pedoman daur ulang sampah plastik sektor industri, dan beberapa dukungan yang sudah kami lakukan yang saat ini sudah disusun adalah penyusunan roadmap penerapan circular economy pada industri elektronik.
Mohon maaf Pak, menginterupsi, mungkin dipercepat dengan waktu. yang sudah
Oke, siap. Baik, ini terkait dengan Making Indonesia 4.0. Jadi pemerintah memiliki aspirasi sebagai 10 ekonomi terbesar di tahun 2030 dengan peningkatan 10% dari net export, dan 2 kali peningkatan produktivitas. Ada 10 strategi prioritas, diantaranya adalah pemberdayaan UMKM dan pembentukan ekosistem inovasi. Ada 7 sektor prioritas, yaitu industri makanan, industri kimia, tekstil, elektronik, bisa dilihat di paparan. Nah, berikutnya, ini terkait dengan IKM ya. Dalam pelaksanaan pencapaian target dari Making Indonesia 4.0, ada 2 dari Kementerian Perindustrian yang fokus, yaitu pemberdayaan UMKM dan pembentukan ekosistem inovasi. Melalui 2 strategi tersebut, Kementerian Perindustrian mengembangkan e-smart IKM, yaitu sistem database IKM yang tersaji dalam profil industri, sentra, dan produk, yang selanjutnya diintegrasikan dengan marketplace yang sudah ada. Tahapan yang dilakukan dalam program e-smart IKM adalah pendaftaran, kurasi, pendampingan, dan workshop. Pengembangan e-smart IKM ini dimaksudkan untuk membangun sebuah database unggulan berdasarkan komoditi yang selanjutnya dapat dipergunakan dalam menyusun kebijakan pengembangan industri kecil menengah melalui pemasaran terpadu. Nah, tujuan dari IKM adalah meningkatkan akses pasar IKM melalui internet marketing, meningkatkan kemampuan IKM dalam akses bahan baku dan teknologi, memberikan panduan bagi pengambil kebijakan dalam fungsi program pembinaan IKM yang lebih terintegrasi dan tepat sasaran. Slide berikutnya, 2 slide lagi. Di masa pandemi ini, program e-smart IKM bersinergi dengan gerakan Bangga Buatan Indonesia sebagai bentuk gotong royong antara pemerintah, swasta, maupun masyarakat, guna mendorong pembelanjaan produk UMKM. Hingga tahun 2020 sebanyak 2014 IKM yang telah lolos proses kurasi dari total pendaftar 3.958 dari berbagai produk, diantaranya pangan, barang, dan kayu, furniture. Nah, sebanyak 900 IKM telah mendapatkan pelatihan onboarding, marketplace, ataupun telah disampaikan ke marketplace untuk onboarding di berbagai marketplace ternama. Selain itu, 1.122 IKM telah masuk ke dalam e-katalog e-smart IKM. Berikutnya, dalam mendukung program e-smart IKM ini, Kementerian Perindustrian berupaya agar para IKM yang terlibat dapat memasukkan datanya ke sistem informasi industri nasional. Dalam sistem ini, IKM diharapkan dapat memberikan jaminan produk, jaminan keamanan, jaminan standar. Kedepannya, data-data yang ada di SINAS ini akan diolah oleh Direktorat Jenderal Industri Kecil, Menengah, dan Aneka untuk dapat diberikan dukungan fasilitas pendanaan dengan beberapa alternatif model pendanaan, antara lain private to private lending, crowdfunding, fintech, financial technology, dan atau KUR. Selain itu, bagi industri yang data-datanya telah ada di INAS akan didorong mendapatkan fasilitas berupa promosi atau onboarding di berbagai e-commerce dengan model pembayaran e-payment yang bekerja sama dengan berbagai bank di Indonesia. Kegiatan-kegiatan tersebut tentunya akan berdampak terhadap penjualan produk IKM dan peningkatan penggunaan produk dalam negeri. Saya pikir itu yang bisa saya sampaikan, Pak Di, selaku moderator. Terima kasih atas waktunya. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Hendro Martono yang telah menjelaskan secara komprehensif mengenai kebijakan pemerintah Indonesia, dalam hari ini Kementerian Perindustrian, dalam mengimplementasikan konsep circular economy pada sektor industri, khususnya yang terkait dengan UMKM. Kemudian kami akan lanjutkan pembahasan dan mempersilahkan Bapak Agustaviano Sofian, yaitu beliau adalah Direktur Perdagangan, Komoditas, dan Kekayaan Intelektual Kemlu. Namun sebelum beliau menyampaikan materi pembahasan, perkenankan kami untuk sedikit membacakan CV beliau. Bapak Agustaviano Sofian, beliau saat ini menjabat sebagai Direktur Perdagangan, Komoditas, dan Kekayaan Intelektual Kemlu, yang antara lain membawa isu-isu UNIDO, WTO, dan FAO. Beliau juga sebelumnya merupakan Direktur Pembangunan Ekonomi dan Lingkungan Hidup Kemlu yang banyak berkaitan dengan isu-isu lingkungan dan Sustainable Development Goal. Pak Agustaviano juga sebelumnya merupakan Su-Sherpa G20 selama periode 2018 hingga 2020. Dan selain itu beliau juga berpengalaman penempatan di luar negeri antara lain di PTRI New York, KBRI Nairobi, dan KBRI Bangkok. Kami persilahkan kepada Pak Agustaviano untuk menyampaikan pembahasan, Pak. Silakan, Pak.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Adi Zulfuat, sahabat lama saya. Pertama kami ucapkan terima kasih Pak Duta Besar, Pak Darmansyah Jumala, beserta jajaran KBRI Wina yang telah mengundang kami dalam kesempatan diskusi yang sangat penting dan menarik ini. Dan tentu juga kami ucapkan terima kasih tadi to all the speakers to UNIDO, which you have presented very nicely, comprehensively, dan juga terima kasih kepada Pak Hendro dari Kementerian Perindustrian, serta tentu saja Bapak dan Ibu yang mengikuti pembahasan webinar ini. Dan tadi kami juga melihat sahabat kami, Pak Duta Besar Sekretariat Dubes kita di Kuwait yang juga tampaknya sudah menjadi staf ahli di Kemenlu Jakarta. Baik, Bapak Ibu, Pak Adi, kalau diizinkan kami akan menggunakan bilingual. Jadi to also respect our colleagues from UNIDO dan juga kemudian nanti dalam bahasa Indonesia juga. Izin Pak Adi. Dear colleagues, particularly also to our UNIDO friends, I'd like to thank you for your very comprehensive presentation. And I do see that the topic that we are discussing comes at an opportune moment as we enter the decade of action, reaching towards the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda. I think this was also mentioned on issues related to SDGs, that circular economy also covers a wide range of goals and targets in SDGs. It was also mentioned by Stefan Sikars during his remarks earlier. And while we know that the current situation that the global is facing, we are still grappling with COVID-19, as we all know. So there is a dual challenge besides the health emergent issues that countries now are still facing. Even there are the second or third wave in a number of countries. And also beside that, of course, we know the huge impact caused in the social and economic factors. And this has also certainly impacted many countries, including Indonesia. Now, the issue that I want to bring is now when we are talking about circular economy, I think this is also a right moment when we can then try to look at the importance, how we want to have circular economy fit to our programs, fit to our strategies in the long term. And yes, it was also mentioned by UNIDO that that Indonesia, we have also, this is also in line with the Indonesia Vision 2045, Indonesian Gold or Indonesia Emas, and also in line with our midterm strategic plan 2020 to 2024. And certainly we would like to see that that if we continue with this development path in trying to mainstream circular economy, we want to have it in a way that it is strategically handled well. There is an importance of the balancing between the energy used and the resource utilization to sustain growth, certainly, and certainly this would be challenging, and if this cannot be dealt, it could be a setback. Even now, as we are facing COVID-19, goals and targets of SDGs are, some analysts say that in the global countries are having setbacks. Now, if we want to try to, re-energize our effort in trying to move forward with the circular economy, we have to do it strategically. And I think the points that was raised by UNIDO was a number of very important points that was raised at the last, particularly on how to move forward at the country level. I will perhaps raise this later on during my intervention here as a discussion. I don't have any PowerPoints, but I was only trying to pick up the important aspects that the resource persons, the speakers had spoken earlier. And what is also important that the government of Indonesia will continue to strengthen its commitment and overcoming the economic, social, and environmental challenges through a circular economy and a low carbon development initiative strategy. I think this is clear to us. We have already a low carbon development initiative strategy that was proposed, that was announced in 2018 by our National Development Agency, or Bappenas. And also, if we look at the RPGM, or the midterm development plan of Indonesia 2020 to 2024, we can see very clearly that SDGs is mainstream into all our programs, right? So therefore, it is important that if we see circular economy, we have to see at a very holistic perspective. Not only that we look at the three dimensions as mentioned also by the speakers at the economic aspect, social, and environment, but we also have to look at beyond on that, how we have to try to prepare. The most important is the resources, particularly the human resources, because certainly circular economy is an instrument and approach to support this, to achieve SDGs. And circular economy can also be a driver for Indonesia toward an economic transformation, particularly supporting the green economy and the low carbon development strategies. And therefore, if we want to link this circular economy to continue to sustain the growth with the development, we have to, again, I have to stress this, handle this strategically in the broader aspects of development and in broader aspect to achieving SDGs. And now I want to now go back again to stress my point, the importance that we see people as the center, the human resources. This must be an important aspect if we want to move with circular economy, to see people at the center. By the end of the day, it would be the people who will have to understand and to have this mindset and have to innovate with this circular economy. I think UNIDO and also from Kemenprin also discussed on the 5R or 4R, from not it is not only a matter of recycling, but it's a whole lot of circular economy that comes from that we are moving a shift from the linear economy to the circular economy that covers from A to Z. I think this was also stressed by Ambassador Damansa Jumala during his opening remarks, that we are shifting from this linear economy to a more comprehensive circular economy. So that's why it is important that we not to lose sight on the importance of the human capital, and not only the human capital, but also the importance of technology, science, and the need for transfer of technology. And as all of this then will have to be also supported by the enabling environment. Now, when I say the enabling environment, I think this will also relate to Pak Hendro's presentation, where Pak Hendro from the Ministry of Industri of Indonesia mentioned about the legislations, about the laws that was relevant to the circular economy. Although we still need to work out again thoroughly to have a national strategy for achieving a circular economy, but it is important that we have this enabling environment for strengthen its legislation and to have an ecosystem for this circular economy to grow. And I also liked the suggestions made by UNIDO on the way forward at the country level. I think they are very good. But again, I want to stress the importance of the human capital. As one cannot deny that people must be the center. It will be the people who will have to innovate. They will have to also gain the capacity and increase their capacity in trying to have a ways that the circular economy is working well, and not to also forget. I want to also mention, beside to center on people, but also to not only look at the big industries, but we also have to look at the small, medium enterprise as well. If I also like to relate to Pa Hendro's presentation earlier, that perhaps that also we have to look also at the small, medium enterprises to move forward with this circular economy. And at the end, what I want to also stress also in this point, that for Indonesia to see in the long term and the 2030 agenda, and with the Indonesian goal for 2045, we need to also avoid the middle income trap. As we all know, if we have a society that has the capacity with the innovation, the science, the technology, we want to avoid this middle income trap. So that's an important aspect that I want to raise, and perhaps a need also the assessment from UNIDO, how Indonesia could also try to avoid this middle income trap as we want to reach the 2030 agenda and also the 2045 vision that have already been highlighted earlier. Izin Bapak Ibu, tadi juga kami juga ingin menanggapi sedikit dari presentasi Pak Hendro. Terima kasih Pak Hendro tadi presentasinya. Cuman memang saya ingin barangkali sebagai pembahas ingin juga memberikan sumbang pemikiran juga. Tadi saya melihat dari presentasi Bapak, terutama di slide yang circular economy dalam rangka pengembangan industri hijau. Saya juga melihat perlunya juga kita tidak hanya fokus pada industri besar juga, tapi juga pada industri bahkan mikro, kecil dan menengah kita, UMKM kita. Karena pada dasarnya kan industri UMKM kita ini merupakan bagian besar dari ekonomi kita, bahkan 95% lebih pertumbuhan ekonomi kita merupakan dari UMKM. Dan saya setuju poin-poin yang disampaikan oleh Pak Hendro, termasuk mendorong efisiensi penggunaan bahan baku dalam negeri. Tadi juga dijelaskan mengenai industri daur ulang di dalam negeri saat ini masih menggunakan impor-impor bahan bakunya dari luar. Tapi harapannya kalau kita sudah memiliki mindset dengan pemikiran circular economy, artinya kita juga harus bisa melakukan pengelolaan sampah atau pengelolaan limbah kita dengan baik, sehingga bahan-bahan limbah yang baik itu plastik, kertas, scrap metal, dan lain-lain yang ada di Indonesia bisa dipergunakan untuk industri daur ulang di Indonesia tanpa dan bahkan kalau memang kita bisa tidak tergantung dari bahan impor limbah industri dari negara lain. Tapi memang saya tahu saat ini kita masih membutuhkan karena masih ada kekurangan stoknya. Dan juga ada poin-poin lain yang juga saya juga setuju, pandangan Pak Hendro mendorong pemanfaatan sampah sebagai energi alternatif, menciptakan insentif, inovasi, dan menghilangkan hambatan. Serta juga, I think this goes together dengan presentasi Pak Hendro also with the UNIDO presentations, the importance of collaboration and the multi-stakeholders approach, because we have to tackle this circular economy not only from the government side, the business or the civil society, but all the relevant stakeholders. We do have to make a national strategy in trying to move forward. We do have already the goals and targets, how we want to reach there, but we have to do it strategically and we have to do it together. Terima kasih Pak Adi.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Agustaviano Sofyan atas pembahasan yang telah dilakukan terhadap presentasi yang telah disampaikan oleh rekan kita di UNIDO maupun dari Kementerian Perindustrian. Sekarang kita akan menuju sesi tanya jawab dan kami telah menerima 3 pertanyaan. Now we go to the question and answer session and we have received 3 questions from the conversation that we have in the chat room. The first question is addressed to UNIDO, to Ms. Neil Guntas and also Dr. Edward Clarence Smith. With regard, the question is like this. I will read it as it is. What is the best practical policy of the government in developing countries due to the pressure of the International Division of Labor and transnational corporation that push the developing countries to receive more negative impact from this corporation? For instance, a lower wage, higher poverty, and high pollution, deforestation, and also high unemployment. Sorry. And that's the first question that is addressed to UNIDO. And the second question, the first question was from Bapak Sofyan Syahnur, and the second question still from Bapak Sofyan Syahnur, but this is addressed to Pak Hendro Martono from Ministry of Industry. Inti pertanyaan dari Pak Sofyan Syahnur yang kedua adalah, berdasarkan riset beliau tahun 2019, ada isu lain yaitu bahwa perusahaan besar dan perusahaan kecil memiliki bargaining power yang lebih besar dari perusahaan UMKM. Dan perusahaan UMKM sebenarnya jumlahnya lebih banyak dari perusahaan besar. Tadi sebenarnya sudah juga disinggung oleh Pak Agustaviano Sofyan mengenai ini. Dari ketidakseimbangan ini, apakah konsep circular economy bisa diterapkan secara baik dengan adanya bahwa ternyata perusahaan besar, memiliki bargaining power lebih besar daripada UMKM, sementara jumlah UMKM lebih banyak. Ini adalah pertanyaan kedua. This is the second question that is addressed to Pak Hendro Martono. And the third question is coming from Ibu Gustri Nurliati. This is addressed to all speakers. The question is, actually there are two questions here for the third question. How to measure the successful of circular economy in industry? Is it zero waste? And the second one is, how about industry that produce technologically enhanced, naturally occurring radioactive material, or TENORM, such as tin mining industry? How can they achieve the circular economy? Those are the questions. So hopefully we have enough time to answer those questions. So first, maybe I will give the floor to UNIDO team, Ms. Tas and Dr. Smith, to answer the questions addressed to you. Please, the floor is yours.
So thank you. Before getting on to the questions, I would like to first thank very much Mr. Martono and Mr. Sofian for both their presentation and summing up and pointing out that human resources are very important and so on. So just to on where to start, let me give you some developed country examples. Finland and Netherlands started by selecting a value chain, specific value chain. And then they called the businesses that are stakeholders in that value chain, and they discussed what can be done. They, of course, knew both sides, the government and the businesses, had already understood what circularity means. What are the basic strategies, like Ned explained? So before doing a very big strategy, they started experimenting. I think this could be also a good way into making a national strategy by testing, starting with few, not all. You have already selected automotive to electronics, textiles. I saw in Mr. Hendro's presentation. Select one or two of these and then start. This would be my advice based on what I see that has worked in a developing country context. Second, SMEs. You know from my CV that at heart and by career, I'm an SME person. I come from a developing country, exactly what you said, Mr. Sofian, a middle-income country stuck in a middle-income trap, Turkey, but I was the vice president of the Small and Medium Enterprise Administration, and all the preceding organizations of the same. Just before I came, I was also, for a few years managing the huge administration. There is no size limit. That is why I have said domestic and global value chains. You produce a product. You've produced different foods, package them, sell them. You produce garments, you produce textiles, you produce parts. And small and medium enterprises are parts of these domestic value chains. They may be national, they may be regional. You have to choose where to start from to create a good practice, learning on the ground. But as you have mentioned, coordination is very important, and that's why I have mentioned, ending my words, that 8 ministries sat down and discussed how to go ahead with transforming industrial parks into eco-industrial parks. So that is what, now under multinationals, that part, multinationals lead global value chains. They set the specifications, and our, from middle or low income countries, our businesses link up to those. So, and to manage anyone who is operating in your country, in my country, we have our regulations. There is not much else to do but to expect the multinationals, when they are operating in our countries or when they are selling us products, to behave properly, whether it's socially or environmentally. That side is in our hand. With that, I'm so sorry. Ned, do you have a few things to add? I am so sorry. I don't know much about the T norm. So, that's not my specialization. I'm not a mining person. I'm a metallurgical engineer, metals and ceramics. You can ask me, but I would not know the mining. And Ned, do you have one or two small?
Well, no, just very quickly. I think that the first question raises some very interesting issues about how does circular economy fit into all of this globalization that we have. I mean, that's not going to go away. And I think there needs to be much more discussion, actually, about how does circular economy fit into global economies. I mean, I don't really have an answer right off the top of my head, but I certainly think that there needs to be a discussion around this.
Yeah, for that, our global consultations is a good exactly. Platform. Please bring your suggestions there on between May 10 and May 12. Thank you. Sorry.
No, and I would also say that, more at the global level, for instance, the EU is pushing very hard internationally on promoting circular economy. I think that developing countries have to enter into this dialogue and use the platforms that they have to make, fight for their corner and make sure that, whatever discussions, whatever recommendations, whatever conclusions are arrived at, help them as much as they help the developed countries. On the mining, I'm going to say something very radical here, and I'm sure Nilgun will not be pleased with me for saying this. But, the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, but in the very long term, we're not going to need mining anymore, right, in the circular economy. I mean, Nilgun has made the very good point, and it's absolutely correct, that of course, while we're circularizing our economies like Indonesia and other developing economies have to continue developing. And that means that they have to build up their stocks, infrastructure, whatever it happens to be. And there simply isn't enough, if you want, old material around to be able to do that. So mining will continue. But, I mean, we have to put it in our minds that really mining in a circular economy disappears. Mining, from a circular economy point of view, I was thinking about this question when I saw it. In and of itself, it's not circular, right? I mean, you can't make mining circular. I'm pulling something out of the ground and I'm giving it to someone else. So that's mining. But you can do a lot of resource efficiency, a lot of cleaner production. That for sure you can do. And of course, remember, mining is also a user. I mean, yes, they're pulling materials out of the ground and giving to somebody else, but they're also using things, huge, big, heavy machinery. Now, that kind of thing can be part of a circular economy. You can go, and in fact, a lot of mining equipment is really circular. It's equipment that goes back to the manufacturer, is remanufactured, and then goes back out to the field. So in that way, mining can be part of a circular economy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tas, and also Dr. Smith for answering the questions. Now, I would like to give the floor to Pak Hendro Martono. But we are actually has exceeded 12 o'clock. But if you allow me to continue maybe a little bit just to answer the questions, I would ask your permission for that. Pak Hendro Martono, kami persilahkan untuk menjawab pertanyaan Pak Sofian yang terkait dengan.
Baik, ya.
Silakan
Baik,
Pak.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Adi. Pak Sofian, saya cuma simpulkan aja bahwa ada ketidakseimbangan antara industri besar dan industri kecil ya dalam pengelolaan circular economy. Sebenarnya kalau itu kompetisi head to head ya enggak ya. Antara industri besar dan industri kecil itu harus bersinergi, Pak. Kementerian Perindustrian juga telah melakukan upaya-upaya khusus agar IKM berdaya saing. Contohnya tadi kan udah dalam paparan saya menyampaikan bahwa ada permasalahan antara pemilahan, pengumpulan. Jadi untuk pengolahan circular ekonomi itu untuk pemilahan pengumpulan itu industri besar pun juga melibatkan bersinergi dengan industri kecil, Pak. Dan juga nanti hasil-hasil yang diolah dari industri kecil pun juga dalam pengelolaan limbah tadi juga dibutuhkan oleh industri-industri besar. Sebagai contoh, pemanfaatan waste plastik menjadi bahan bakar di industri semen. Itu kan diolahnya juga pencacahannya limbah plastik segala macam oleh umumnya industri kecil. Kami juga sudah membangun dengan bantuan global ya, global financial melalui implementation agent-nya, contohnya nih ya, UNDP udah membangun 6 mini depo di 6 wilayah provinsi untuk mengolah sampah plastik menjadi barang bahan bakar alternatif. Itu Pak contohnya untuk menjawab Pak Sofian ya. Yang untuk Bu Gustri, how to measure successful circular economy in industry? Is it zero waste? Enggak, bukan target pengukur CA itu zero waste, bukan. Tapi dilihat dari keberhasilan penerapan CA itu pada industri dapat diukur melalui peningkatan kapasitas produksinya, Pak. Dan volume produksi pada industri daur ulang. Serta redesign yang dilakukan oleh industri untuk memproduksi produk yang dapat didaur ulang dan memungkinkan untuk masa guna yang lebih lama. Secara nasional, keberhasilan circular economy juga dapat dilihat dari tingkat pemanfaatan sampah dari dalam negeri oleh industri daur ulang, pengurangan impor sampah, serta penggunaan barang daur ulang oleh masyarakat. Nah, kalau yang terkait dengan technologically enhanced naturally occurring radioactive material TENOM pada tin mining industry, ini kan adalah industri yang ada di mulut tambang, Pak ya. Mungkin Kementerian SDM yang bisa menjawab ini, Pak. Jadi kalau kami yang di luar mulut tambang, Pak, industri yang kita ini. Sementara itu yang bisa saya jawab, Pak. Terima kasih.
Baik Pak, terima kasih untuk jawaban yang telah disampaikan untuk pertanyaan. Sayang sekali ternyata waktu sudah tidak memungkinkan bagi kami karena sudah melewati schedule untuk mau komen sedikit. Agus tadi oh, we still masih ada satu sedikit komentar dari Pak Agus Taviano Sofian untuk follow up komen Pak. Kami persilahkan Pak sebelum kita tutup. Terima kasih.
Izin Pak Adi, Bapak Ibu, just for 1 minute, and thank you to Ms. Tas for responding my comment. I agree with you that we do have to select a certain kind of sector. Now, I don't know, perhaps you have already known that recently there have been a publication. It was designed by UNDP Indonesia together with Bappenas, the National Development Agency. And they have identified 5 sectors that Indonesia could move on, could see the potentials for the benefit of circular economy. There are food and beverages, construction, electronic, textile, and retail in plastic. So I mean, there is also this intention in finding an appropriate and looking and for these sectors that you mentioned. But if I may just a little bit more add that perhaps my also advice to international organizations such as UNIDO, it would also be good that you can also collaborate with other international agencies, so that you can collaborate together with the UNDP or other agencies, so not to duplicate the efforts, so that we all build for a better and stronger effort together. Thank you. Terima kasih, Pak Adi.
Yes, thank you, Pak Agustaviano. And with that,
if I may just say something.
Oh, yes, sure.
Because, well, we do collaborate with the other UN agencies. We are a part of the UN country team. We have our representative and his office. We have our projects, and chief technical advisor is with us. So in fact, we do collaborate. And I want to believe that UNDP that completed that study as a part of its work on national strategies, and not as a part of its work on industrial development, because for industrial development we would expect to be in the circle with the UNDP. But one last thing, if you look through Ned's presentation, that part, and also the policies, every single circular economy business practice requires innovation, and that's innovation by the government, but more so innovation by businesses. And coming from private sector development and my long years of actually also working in small and medium enterprises, it's the business community, particularly in a developing context, developing country context, it's the businesses that innovate. So there has to be more support to businesses to do that innovation, because like in my own country, Turkey, we do very little basic primary, basic research. This is, we don't find new molecules or new, little, but our companies innovate every day, every year, right? They create the new technologies. So that is some place to focus on, and where they have also higher quality in the manufacturing sector, higher quality human resources. They have the engineers, they have the master craftsmen, they have the technicians, which are above the average, also including skills, experience. So that's the place to put the support in. Sorry, I went on, but I am very passionate about all of this. Being an engineer myself, I see great prospects. And I thank you on behalf of UNIDO, particularly also His Excellency, the Ambassador, but also all of you for, again, inviting us into this discussion. We are all enjoyed it very, very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tas, for your responses with the previous comment from Pak Agustaviano. So we have arrived to the end of our webinar. Again, I would like to express our appreciation to all the speakers for having shared your views with us. I will not draw any conclusions, but there's one thing I really hope, that the views that shared among us here will be beneficial for all stakeholders that are following discussion in the government or the private sector, or maybe in the non-governmental organization. I hope it will be useful for them as a reference for our efforts to move forwards in implementing circular economy, especially in the industrial development. So with that, I will close this webinar. Bapak Ibu sekalian, kami mengucapkan terima kasih banyak atas perhatian Bapak Ibu semua yang masih setia mengikuti webinar ini sampai selesai, kepada para kepala perwakilan, para dubes, dan juga kepada fasilitator, para pembicara yang telah hadir di sini yang menyampaikan materinya. Kami tidak akan mengambil kesimpulan, tapi sangat berharap bahwa pandangan-pandangan yang disampaikan oleh para pembicara semoga dapat bermanfaat bagi semua pemangku kepentingan isu ekonomi sirkular maupun pemangku kepentingan sektor industri. Mudah-mudahan hal ini bisa menjadi referensi bagi upaya kita untuk mengimplementasikan isu sirkular ekonomi ini, sehingga kita dapat manfaat tidak hanya dari sisi ekonomi, tetapi juga dari sisi pelestarian lingkungan. Demikian kami tutup. Selamat siang, selamat sore, dan juga selamat berbuka puasa yang sebentar lagi juga akan berbuka puasa. Dengan ini kami tutup. Mohon maaf apabila ada kata-kata yang salah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Terima kasih Pak
wabarakatuh.
Adi,
Terima
Pak Indro.
Terima kasih
Thank
Pak Adi,
you,
Pak
Mr.
Agus, Tiviano,
Anaerobic
Sofian.
Parents,
Very much.
Unido team. Thank you very much. Bapak Ibu, mohon pamit semua. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Selamat
Pak
berbuka
Dubes.
bagi yang
Bye-bye.